It's still my favorite part when it decides to tell me it's posting, but it's not posting. Hey everybody, Evan Selleck, PhoneDog. Welcome to a special edition of PhoneDog Live. Today, as you can probably guess, we are talking about the iPhone 5C and the iPhone 5S. They're new, they're shiny, one's plastic, one's not. And today with me for special edition is the editor-in-chief of Byte Now. His name is Andrew Jaleff, and welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Glad to have you. All right, so I guess we will start with what Apple started with, hardware-wise. We now know that the iPhone 5C is official. It exists, it's plastic, and it's colorful. Features-wise, it's basically an iPhone 5. Even pricing and, model-wise, there's a 16 gig option for $99 on contract, and the 32 gig option is $199 on contract, so nothing too surprising there. It's going to be on all four major carriers, so also, again, not surprising. Basically, the iPhone 5C is a good way to get rid of the iPhone 5 without just getting rid of the iPhone 5. It's pretty obvious that they wanted to get rid of the 5 because having the 5S looks so much similar to the 5 and on being on stands and things like that, they probably didn't want to do that again. And to be honest with you, the iPhone 5C's pricing isn't cheap necessarily, but is it cheap enough? That's my question to you. Is it cheap enough?
If people can understand the differences from the 4S to the 5C, then I think it is on a contract.
And who does that fall to? Do you think that falls to Apple to try and get people to realize, or is that going to be left to sales reps in stores?
What kind of marketing push would Apple have behind? I just don't know what kind of balance they could find in the 5S and the 5C marketing. So I think it might fall more on the carriers. But I mean, they've done it in the past where they've marketed older generations of phones.
I feel like the marketing for the 5C is probably going to be a bit more than we've seen for previously. Because I mean, while we're looking at it as like a replacement for an old phone, it's still technically new hardware. So
yeah, because colors.
Colors, and it does have a bigger battery than the iPhone 5. So it is technically new, while being based off something, directly being based off something that's old. So it does have new features. So there is marketable things that they can talk about. I mean, there's no denying that the iPhone 5C is a marketable device. I mean, it's colorful. People are going to want it. It's cheap and things like that. I think the only thing that's really annoying me right now, just looking at the picture of the phone, is that I almost feel like the 5C is built more for iOS 7 than even the iPhone 5S.
Yeah.
I mean, they're like, hey, look at this phone. It matches iOS 7. And then you go to the 5S and it's like, gold doesn't match anything, but here it is.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. That's price-wise, I don't think it's all that surprising. I mean, the 16 gig model is $549, and the 32 gig is $649, and if I'm not mistaken, the 16 gig iPhone 5S is $649. So, saving $100 on off contract to get the 5C, I don't know if I would do that. I don't know if it's worth that.
To me, it's not. I mean, especially when you talk about the new camera upgrades and the fingerprint scanner, which we haven't really talked about yet, but I thought it was. I feel like it's one of those things. If Samsung did it, I would call it a big gimmick. But now that I don't know.
I think they called that the reality distortion field. Pretty sure that's what they call that.
Maybe.
But I mean, I understand what you're saying. I mean, okay, but I think in this case, all it is for Apple is to get rid of the 5. I mean, that's pretty much the only reason why this device exists. So they don't have two devices on market that look exactly the same, which is a harder thing to market. I mean, if you look at them both and you're like, what's the difference? Price-wise, I mean, they were going to price drop the iPhone 5, obviously, but they didn't want to do that. So instead, they went with a cheaper-made device and priced it what they would have dropped the iPhone 5 down to. So, I mean, it's a hard balance for us because we're looking at it like it is new, but it's not new.
Yeah, I mean, that was the angle that nobody ever really considered, replacing the iPhone 5 because it looks exactly the same. Everybody thought that the 5C was going to be the 5C was going to fly in and be substantially cheaper.
Right.
But
It was going to replace the 4S
but
essentially.
as soon as they said that they were using iPhone 5 hardware, pretty much, I mean, the whole cheap concept kind of went out the window for me, and I was like, oh, it's still going to be 549, 649.
Yep. As soon as there were rumors, I think for like the last 3 weeks or so, that really started to focus that the iPhone 5C was going to be just an iPhone 5 in a colorful shell. So I think once those started to stick around, and it wasn't just a one-off kind of thing, it started to make more sense that Apple wasn't going necessarily for a cheap phone. They were just trying to phase out an old phone.
Yeah.
Which and that makes sense. I mean, that's that sounds more like Apple as opposed to making a really cheap phone. It's
Yeah, I mean, and with the introduction of the new carriers in Japan and China, their sales numbers are going to boom quite a bit. So are they actually worried about hitting those emerging markets right now?
I don't. I mean, I don't think they ever were. I mean,
No.
for markets where the iPhone isn't huge, they have the iPod Touch, and the same thing here in the States. It's a gateway device. You buy an iPod Touch for someone who either can't afford a phone contract or is a kid and can't have a phone contract, and then when they are able to get that phone, you give them an iPhone. That's because what they know, and they want to keep their apps and things like that. So it's a gateway device, and I'm not surprised that they didn't get rid of it today. I am kind of surprised that they didn't have new iPods in general, though. That was
Yeah, I was kind of. I mean, I don't know what I was expecting. I thought it was going to be mostly iPhone focused, but I thought they were going to throw something else in there.
Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of upset that their one more thing was a live show.
Yeah, Elvis Costello, because
I wasn't expecting that, so they surprised me. So I do kind of wish Tim Cook would have been like, oh, and one more thing, here's Elvis Costello.
Yeah. Well, I
That'd have
mean,
been nice.
going back to the phones, I think the 4S fits nicely in that cheap bracket if you're going to buy it off contract now, because I guess they can sell that for what, 400 now?
Yeah, probably 349.
But
Probably.
that's also 3-year-old hardware.
Right, but I mean, if they do price it around 349 or anything around that, I mean, 3-year-old hardware, I guess.
Well, I mean,
The only thing otherwise you're gonna, with that price range is gonna be a Nexus 4.
yeah. I mean, in
But
the States, it doesn't really matter yet, but I don't know.
I can't go back to the iPhone 4S. I've tried. Can't do it.
No,
I mean, it's not even necessarily about the screen. It actually feels like a brick.
Yeah, it does.
All right, so I mean, as far as the iPhone 5C is concerned, for me, I mean, it makes sense to phase out the 5 in the way that they did it, so they don't have two devices that look exactly the same. I don't necessarily think it's worth the price though, because it's plastic. And I mean, it doesn't work where we can sit here and bag on Samsung for using plastic devices, or even LG or any other company, and them, pricing it so high, and then when Apple does it, be like, oh no, it's fine. Like, it doesn't work like that. So I mean, it shouldn't work like that. So the idea that you're paying a premium for iOS, that's up to you as a person, that kind of thing. But as a plastic phone, I'm not necessarily on board that $549 or $649 is all that worth it, especially not for a year-old hardware.
Yeah, it costs far less to put a piece of plastic together than it does to machine craft aluminum. But,
Right. And you do have to, I mean, every single Apple event, you just got to give them credit. Like, instead of saying like the iPhone 5C uses the same technology as the iPhone 5, they're like, it uses the incredible technology in the iPhone. It's like, really? All right. And it works too. Like, you're like, oh, it's not the same, it's incredible. Okay. All right, whatever, I'll take it. All right, so I mean, iPhone 5C, it's a new iPhone 5. It's a thing that you can buy for a lot of money or no money if you want to sign a contract, however you want to do it. But the flagship device, the iPhone 5S, it's just one of those things that we knew was coming. And
literally every single part of the iPhone 5S was put together before today.
Yeah.
And that's been the case for the last 2 years now.
We have to get used to that, right? I mean, it's just not. I mean, there's no surprises in technology anymore. I mean, we even have like Samsung with the Galaxy Gear. I mean, their executive was like, yeah, it's coming. Who cares?
Yeah, well, you saw it with Tim Cook at the All Things D conference, that when he said we were doubling down on secrecy. That was last year, right? Yeah.
Something like that. That sounds right.
And it feels like they opened the gates twice as wide instead of closing them.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely feels like that. I mean, you can't say you're going to double down and then have your entire device leak. I mean,
I thought there was going to be something, so just one little thing that I haven't seen.
I think the idea is that despite we see all of it leaked, but we don't actually ever see the whole thing put together outside of like shells and stuff like that. I think Apple still understands that while we may know what's coming, seeing it on the screen working and seeing it how it all works together is still kind of why we go, and why we get excited for Apple devices and see what's coming. Because I mean that's what who cares that we knew a fingerprint scanner was coming? How does it work?
Yeah, they made it look very magical.
Right, and that's what Apple does. You want to be swayed by the magic and things like that. So, I seeing the leaks and things like that, I'm not surprised. Even with the whole doubling down and things like that, I think it's still going to happen. I mean, people still, pay to see leaks. There's still people out there who get paid to find out as much as they can before a phone gets announced, especially when it's an Apple product. So
yeah, I mean, the guy who was leaking all the parts this year made quite a bit of money selling people leaked parts.
Exactly.
So the demand is there. It's just I don't know.
I'm looking over our Facebook comments at the moment, and all right, so on Facebook, apps being posted that I thought that iPhone 5C was supposed to be cheap. It looks like they simply increased the price of the normal iPhone and lowered this by $50. That is essentially true, but so here's where the leaks and the misinformation comes in, because if you just hear it enough and enough and enough, you accept it as truth. And I mean, I understand that that's going to happen anyway, but it's not like Apple ever said this phone's going to be cheap.
Yeah.
Never once was Apple like, yeah, we're making a cheap iPhone.
No, it was all speculation from the start.
That's unfortunate. I mean, so everyone expected the iPhone 5C to stand for cheap, not really, but as a joke. And it's not like Apple was like, really, we're going to make this phone for people who don't want to spend any money for a brand new iPhone.
Mm-hmm.
So it's unfortunate, and hopefully it doesn't affect sales. We'll have to wait and see if it does.
I'm trying to figure out which device is going to sell better now, because people kind of really like color.
I like color. I mean,
and the color choices for the 5S, they're not. I don't want to call them boring, but they're not lime green.
Right, or I don't know. I'll call them boring. I don't mind calling them boring.
They all have like a more professional, high quality feel and look to them. But the color, it's Apple, and it makes it seem like, hey, this is cool. I have a big bright pink iPhone.
Right, and at first I totally thought that was a red iPhone, but I guess I don't know. I still would call it salmon, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I know what you mean. The iPhone 5, it's like the iPhone 5s, of older, and then the iPhone 5S are supposed to be these, high-end devices, so they're not supposed to look like toys. And I wonder if that's more or less like a stab towards HTC and Nokia and things like that. But it almost reinforces it with this phone that is meant to be lesser than the iPhone 5S, and it is colorful. So it almost like digs it in. Apple's like, yeah, our cheap phone, in air quotes, our cheap phone is super colorful, but our flagship device doesn't mess around with that stuff.
Yeah, it reminds me of when the iPod minis came out, and they were all different multicolored iPods, and then they were going up against the slate and white or silver iPod Classics.
Right.
So I mean, I don't know. It's weird how they do that, and I'm still just interested to see, like, walking around the street, what am I going to see at sporting events? Am I going to see iPhone 5Cs, or am I going to see iPhone 5Ss?
And yeah, that's an interesting question, because despite the fact that we okay, so I'm sorry, another question on Facebook. Kong Feng Tao asked, how how come they call it cheap when the price is 549? Again, they didn't call it cheap. We called it cheap, and I'm not, that was just what we thought was going to happen. But, you know, that's the nature of leaks and speculation. Sometimes you just can't get out of it.
Actually, Apple, they didn't call it cheap. They called it. What was the word they used? Did they use cheaper?
I don't even think they use cheaper, to be honest with you.
Because when they announced the price, I don't know. No, they didn't use that word. They were just talking about the price tier. They said it was going to slide in right with the iPhone 5.
Right.
Then. So I don't know. I guess the iPhone 5S. Did we talk about the camera now?
Yeah. I mean the camera. So.
Because wow.
Right. I mean, from the pictures and everything that I've seen, and the reaction, basically, the reaction was pretty much the same. It was an unequivocal, the iPhone 5S now is the camera to beat. And it's almost entertaining. I mean, I almost feel like Apple, they're obviously focusing on the camera, but at the same time, I feel like they're not. I feel like they're just like, we made a camera, we put it in this phone, it's still better than all of yours. But HTC, Samsung, and everyone else is like, they're really trying with the camera.
Yeah, look at our camera. It's still not as good as the iPhone, but we're going to try and compete.
Right. And then Motorola doesn't care, so they're just making phones. So
I really think they're using the old Razr cameras with some kind of software. I don't know. Those cameras are bad. The Moto X camera is really bad.
Yeah. None of them are all that great. I gotta say that I mean, obviously the majority of comments and whatnot are that the iPhone is terrible and that it's a terrible phone and
yep,
et cetera, et cetera. Which is fine. You're allowed to think that the iPhone is a terrible phone.
Absolutely.
And for some people, it probably is. I will say that I wasn't necessarily expecting Apple to open iOS, but maybe I was expecting more sharing between apps, so it's not necessarily just left up to developers. I was hoping that iOS itself would, like Android, where you can share everything to everything wherever you want. That's a nice feature to be able to do that with your smartphone. So, I mean, it's just one of those things where I'm wondering if Apple is ever going to jump on that bandwagon or not, or if they just don't care.
I don't think they will. You see it a little bit in some apps.
Right, but it's up to the apps.
It's up to the apps, and I don't think they give them a really easy platform to embed that. I mean, you see some of the new RSS apps. You're able to open links in Chrome, and other apps let you do that, but I don't ever think that'll become. You definitely won't ever be able to pick app defaults. I don't think that'll ever be a thing.
Yeah, it's almost. I wrote an article not too long ago that I wish iPhone had more gimmicks. Like, I feel like their focus on making iOS just work really well has reached a point where I honestly believe that they could do that, but still add stuff and make the features of iOS really stand out. Don't get me wrong, giving it the aesthetic boost that it has with iOS 7 and making everything different is great. I wasn't a big fan of iOS 7's looks when it first.
I'm still not.
And I know a lot of people who aren't, but after using it for, I've been using it on one device or another since the first beta, and it's grown on me. And the truth of the matter is I don't look at the icons that much. I'm not sitting there investigating what settings looks like.
No, the icons aren't that big of a deal to me. It's parts of it have grown on me, parts of it haven't. The things that bother me are like the minimal buttons that they switch to, like in the apps, like the share button in the browser. Just that little tiny box with an arrow. What the hell is that?
Right. Yeah. I can understand that.
That doesn't insinuate share at all.
Okay, but I mean, like with Windows Phone, I mean, half that stuff is in. You can't understand any of that stuff.
No.
You actually have to actually like open that tray and find out what it means. But yeah, I don't know why an arrow up means share. I don't.
Out of a little rectangle, I don't know. Like half of the design decisions baffle me, and I think they will evolve over time. as the new version of iOS continues to evolve.
That's kind of what we were hearing right after iOS 7 was announced, and everyone was all angry and whatnot. Everyone at Apple kept saying that they were, still adjusting and things like that. None of that happened. I didn't see anything that
Yeah.
changed in iOS 7. So,
Hey, they finally added dots in the calendar.
right, yeah. But I
That
feel
was
like that
the
was a
most.
natural change. I feel like that was coming anyway.
Yeah, that was the most mind-boggling thing. We're gonna make a calendar app that's new and supposed to be pretty, but we're not gonna let it show you when you have appointments.
Right. Oh man.
Could you imagine going to your boss? Why did you miss your appointment? Oh, iOS 7 didn't tell me.
My iPhone ate my appointment. Okay, so yeah, let's actually talk about the camera. So the camera itself. Like we were saying, the reaction inside the announcement was that the camera is the one to beat. It has a new 5-element lens that's 15% larger and includes an f2.2 aperture. The camera itself is still 8 megapixels, but the pixels themselves have increased in size. I think they said they were like 1.5 microns or something like that.
Yeah.
The new flash has 2 LEDs, and this is probably one of the coolest parts. They work together. I think the first LED, or however you want to look at, one LED is warm and amber, and the other is cool and white. I think
Cool and
that's
white,
how. Yeah, and so they work together. There's over 1,000 different combinations that these two LEDs can work out to make it so you get the best image possible.
I
And
thought that was pretty cool because half the time when I take pictures with my phone, I turn the flash off because
absolutely, I don't ever
it
have the flash on my camera.
doesn't do anything except
Exactly.
overexpose.
Exactly. And Apple also included slow motion and burst, and the new burst, it's 10 frames per second, and you can record video at 120 frames per second. But it's only 720p HD. So take that for what it's worth. So the camera at still 8 megapixels, obviously people are going to be like, oh, it's not an improvement, but when all you hear at this reaction is that it's still the camera to beat, that's impressive to me. Because I mean, there's been so many different phones launched since the iPhone 5, and so many of them have been like, our camera is the best camera ever, that Apple's just like, no, sorry,
No, that's ours.
we can still do better. And again, I still don't think Apple takes a huge focus on camera. I think they just do it. And that could just be, the distortion field working, but I don't know. I just feel like, to me, like, they show the camera, it works. The crowd is like, oh, that's better than everything else. It's not Apple being like, sorry, our camera's better than your camera.
Yeah,
It's really,
it's very strange to me how they announce their cameras because I feel like they take pride in it, but it's not like the pride and joy of their entire keynote.
right.
They're like, oh, everyone loves taking pictures on their iPhones, and on Flickr, the iPhone 4S is the most popular camera, and
And so we'll make
that's all they
it
say.
the best
They're
one.
not like, hey, stomping all over the competition. This is the camera you need. We spent so much time developing this and forgot about the rest of the phone.
our our megapixels don't matter. We only need 4.
I mean, megapixels don't matter.
Well, they don't. And I feel
to an
like,
extent they do, but we live in a digital age where everything gets compressed and
okay, so here's a somewhat random question for you. Do you think who makes the better statement, that the iPhone 5S has the same megapixels as the iPhone 5, a year-old camera, or does HTC make a bigger statement saying that we only need 4 megapixels / ultra pixels? I mean, who makes the bigger statement? That megapixels don't matter, because HTC is telling people that they don't by only having 4 and calling it something else entirely, versus Apple saying we don't actually need to bump up to a 13 or a 20 or a 48, whatever.
I think Apple makes the bigger statement because their pictures are continuously improving. And the pictures on the one weren't terrible, but I mean they were really good in low light, but I wouldn't call them top-notch quality like the iPhone can take. I mean, you can take pictures with an iPhone and compare them to SLR photos, and they're kind of the same.
Yeah. I mean, photographers would probably freak out. But yeah, I mean, for me personally, like it also depends on your level of how
Uh,
much of a photographer you are. Like if you're just taking pictures of flowers out on the street, you probably don't need an SLR or a DSLR,
no.
but an iPhone will work. I'm actually kind of glad that the marketing nonsense with low light pictures. I mean, we got blitzed by that, early this year up until now. Like, I mean, Nokia did a good job of making everyone assume that people take pictures in dark taverns. I mean,
Yeah, they did.
everyone was like, our low light is the best, and yeah, I mean, even Samsung jumped on that bandwagon. They're like, no, our low light's the best. I'm like, it's date time a lot when I take pictures. I don't know. I just
Yeah. Or in a lit room, or
yeah, or I don't know.
I mean, I
Uh,
guess if you want to improve concert photos, maybe that's the
which
thing.
which they do. Yeah, I don't know. I
I mean,
guess
I've been to 4 concerts in the last week and a half, and I'm looking at some of the pictures on my phone, and I'm just like, this is garbage. But I'm also using a Nexus 4, so garbage.
that's yeah, that's garbage anyway.
Do you remember what the aperture on the iPhone 5 was?
I don't even remember them talking about it.
Was it 1.9 or 2.0?
Let's find out.
I mean, that's not that big of a difference, but
I am curious though. Whoa, yay advertisements. It's a blah blah. It's a
or is it 1.4?
2.4. 2.4.
Oh, right, it goes backwards. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
See, we're just gonna get slashed by photography people now.
Right. Uh, um, okay, yeah. So basically, based on reactions, the camera on the iPhone 5s is spectacular. Again, but that could change once people actually get their iPhone 5s, and
Yeah.
people start taking pictures and the reviews happen and all that jazz. So the other big feature, and this is probably the killer feature of the iPhone 5s, because the S upgrades have to have something to make people actually upgrade. For the people who are going to upgrade. The killer feature though is the new home button. It's a capacitive sapphire home button. It also includes Apple's new Touch ID sensor. As we've heard for months now that the iPhone 5s was going to have a fingerprint sensor, and it does. There's a stainless steel ring around the home button that will turn the sensor on, and the button itself is made of sapphire, like I said. So it shouldn't get scratched. Shouldn't. Who knows what will actually happen when people get their hands on it. It will prevent unwanted intruders from getting into the phone, obviously, but you can also use it for purchases. So, I mean, if you use the iPhone and you go into the App Store, then you know that more often than not, after you purchase something, you have to put in your password. So, it's a nice feature, but it's an annoying feature.
There's
So,
nothing that bothers me more.
if you're the only person that uses your phone, it's annoying, but I understand the idea. And even for free apps, because most free apps now are free apps that have in-app purchases. So,
Hmm.
I get the idea. But adding the fingerprint sensors should help with that. My question through the whole thing was that people in the reactions that were the speed of the sensor was pretty quick,
Hmm.
but I hope that doesn't slow down, or I hope it's not laggy to begin with. Like I hope the first time you turn it on and you use that sensor, it just opens your phone and you're ready to go. Like if I have to put my phone there, my thumb there, and I have to wait for 2 seconds, 3 seconds, yeah, that's the last time I used that.
I didn't see the video yet. I'm curious to how it's going to work. Is it something you have to pull out of your pocket, turn the screen on, then hit the sensor?
As far as I
Or
know, it's just hit the sensor. Like you
okay,
just put your thumb on the sensor, which is nice.
because I was hoping it wasn't going to be something ludicrous like turn on the phone, slide to unlock, and then hit the sensor instead of the passcode. But
That
it's good to know that you can just put your thumb there and get into your phone.
you know, like I feel like that's ridiculous and that no one would ever think of doing that. But at the same time, like I feel like that would be just the logical step for Apple. They'd be like, well, the passcode comes up after you hit slide to unlock, so why wouldn't the fingerprint sensor?
Yeah.
And like I just feel like someone would be like, yeah, that makes sense. No, it doesn't. Doesn't make any sense. Don't do that. But yeah, from actions that I saw, I'm pretty sure you can activate your iPhone with the sensor now.
It definitely makes me think of where Apple's going to take the iPhone in the future. Now that Passbook is kind of maturing a little bit, and now that they have pretty much one way for people to never get into your phone unless they cut your hand off.
Right, but then if they cut your hand off or cut your thumbs off, you don't really need a phone anyway. So
Yeah, exactly. And like where do they go from here? Does next year's iPhone, are they ever going to usher in some kind of mobile paying service? Because
Well,
NFC is flopping.
well,
NFC payments are
NFC
just
didn't
never.
they? I mean, didn't they have? Because I know you can use your phone to pay for your iPhone for like pay for baseball tickets, and I mean, Passbook exists. I've never used it because I don't live in an area where I can. Um, but I mean, it exists. I don't
I've
know. I
used it
feel
at
like that's something that
Starbucks.
they could. Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's something they could just let exist and not actually ever move on it.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a good concept, and I want them to move on it because I hate wallets.
Right.
I just want to carry my phone into a store and buy something with it. Because I've done it with Google Wallet several times with NFC, and it's just like the greatest feeling.
Right. Tarek Halaby on Facebook says a Nokia Lumia running iOS 7. I guess. I mean,
What?
Nokia wasn't the first people to have colorful phones. I don't know. Whatever. Doesn't really matter. Um, Joseph Wade on Facebook says the Steve Jobs era is truly done. That's interesting.
Where does
Probably.
that come from?
Oh, it's on our Facebook comments.
I'm just
Uh,
trying to think of what that means.
I don't know. I mean, you would think that'd be obvious since Steve Jobs isn't here anymore, but what are you gonna do? Um, okay, so that's a good question. So does the iPhone 5S and the iPhone 5C somehow buck the trend of that Apple has set for the last however many years, or is it exactly what we should have expected?
The trend of releasing a new phone with substantial
Yeah,
improvements.
or even minor improvements slash.
That's what I meant. Sorry.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know if I would say it completely bucks the trend because I feel like the 5C is still the iPhone 5, just not.
I kind of wish the iPhone 5C had the new processor. I'm not gonna lie. Like
So
even
do
just
I.
that, just not the camera or the fingerprint sensor, but the faster processor and the bigger battery. I think that
And
would
we
have
haven't
been.
even talked about that yet. I mean, 64-bit and uh, help me out here. The M7.
The M7, right? Yeah. So what Andy is talking about is that the new processor in the iPhone 5S is the A7, which we already knew. We knew the name, but the 64-bit actually was rumored, I think once or twice, but no
Mm,
one actually clung on to it. I don't think. Um, as Apple says, it's the first 64-bit chip in a smartphone. All the
believe they're
built-in apps,
correct.
I think they're correct. Um,
The new
um,
Nexus 7 has a 64-bit chip,
but not a
and
smartphone.
it's
So
also a tablet. And I
yeah.
think last year's Nexus 10 had a 64-bit chip.
Yeah, so I think they're pretty. I think they're right on the smartphone part. I'm sure if they're not, someone will yell. But the iOS 7 is built for 64-bit, and so are the built-in apps. And I think they talked about the Xcode will work on 64-bit, so upgrades should be easy for app developers. The new chip is twice as fast as the old CPU in the iPhone 5, and I think the graphics were some ridiculous number, like 56 times faster.
56 times.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then after they showed that, they showed like they have been for the last 3 years, Infinity Blade 3, which based on the reactions were a bunch of game cutscenes that you could play that never stuttered and never lagged. So
So Infinity Blade.
yeah, so it sounds like once again, well, once again that Apple has figured out how to make a processor that isn't quad core or octa-core or anything like that work for iOS. And and actually, what I kept saying over and over again while Apple was announcing the hardware specs is that they can't compete with the competition. And I have to personally say that that is one of the most annoying things that I've ever heard. Uh, they don't have to compete spec for spec with the competition. Android devices have to compete with other Android devices spec for
Hmm.
spec. I mean, there's a reason why LG had to create the G2 if they wanted to be anywhere near the top of the food chain with, against Samsung or even HTC. Um, and the same thing with the One, and the same thing with the Galaxy S4. They have to compete with quad cores and octa cores and 3 gigs of RAM and things like that. That's why Windows Phone doesn't need to compete with the competition. It just works Windows Phone works on dual cores. It doesn't need quad-core processors. I'm glad they're getting them, I guess, but they don't need it. The iPhone doesn't need a quad-core processor. I mean, I'm just from personal experience, playing games on Android phones are terrible. They lag. They're never any fun. The sound is sometimes off on games and things like that. Don't get me wrong, on tablet optimized games like on the new Nexus 7, a lot of those games are fun, but playing them on smartphones just isn't. I would never play Infinity Blade 3 on an HTC One. I wish I could because of the display, but I just wouldn't do it.
I almost broke my Nexus 4 playing Temple Run because it takes like a quarter of a second to react to your swipe.
That's what I'm talking about. It's just, I mean, it's not. No, it is terrible. It is. As a gamer, it's absolutely terrible, and it should never happen.
I just don't like mobile games to begin with. I'm in the very small portion of that crowd, but
no, that's understandable. I mean, I play them, but I don't necessarily. I would never give up console gaming for.
Yeah, I'm not in the group of people that thinks that consoles are dying to mobile games on smartphones.
John Gruber. Sorry. Anyway. All right. So the last thing. Okay. So the 5C we talked about earlier is going to be $99 and $199 for the 16 gig and the 32 gig. It launches on September 20th. You can pre-order it starting September 13th. Interesting move from Apple is that you can't pre-order the iPhone 5S.
Very strange, very weird, very annoying, and it'll probably save me money. I don't know.
I don't know if it. I mean, it's not gonna. It's not gonna stop me from doing anything. But man, September 20th is gonna be a scary day. Like, yeah, the internet is gonna break. I mean, Apple's site's not gonna work on the 20th. I don't know if the sales are gonna start at 12:01 Apple, in California time. But
you would think that it would work kind of the same as the pre-order system.
Well, you'd think, but I mean, that's everybody, because there's no pre-order, so everyone on the 20th is going to be like, I need my damn iPhone, and everyone at the same time is going to be like, well, let's go to apple.com and order an iPhone.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if carriers open pre-orders.
Man, they have to, right? I mean,
I know Verizon has done that before. They've pre-ordered devices that manufacturers won't.
Right, and I don't know. I mean, maybe AT&T doesn't because it's Apple and they listen to AT&T, or they listen to Apple. But not having a pre-order is very strange.
What was the last major phone that they didn't have a pre-order for?
I don't even remember.
The 4? That sounds right.
I don't know. Maybe.
No, they had pre-orders before. I think it was a 3GS. I know there was at least one that they didn't have pre-orders for.
No. Launch day pre-orders for the 3GS as well.
Oh, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's just how weird it is.
I seriously think that they've always had pre-orders, and I actually on Twitter, someone was like, "Does the iPhone 5S not have pre-orders?" And I was like, "Of course it does," because I mean it's just one of those things. Like, I just was not expecting that, and seriously, like, the fact that they don't have pre-orders tells me that I'm not going anywhere near apple.com on the 20th. Like, if I decide to get this phone, I'm going into a store.
So here's the question. Are there going to be severe availability problems? Or do you think that there will be no availability problems, and that's why they're not launching pre-orders?
For me, not having pre-orders means that they are absolutely confident that they have a ton of these phones ready to go. I mean, just a ton of them.
I mean, with bringing China Mobile and Docomo on board, you would think.
Yeah, well, just that alone. Yeah, exactly. But
because that's actually, they're launching with the U.S. for the first time, I think they said, right?
Yep, on the 20th. It goes, I mean, practically everywhere. I mean, United Kingdom people, people in Great Britain are going to, in that area, in Europe, are going to get a lot of their phones from Germany, France, and things like that. So, I mean, it's almost scary. Like, it's one of those things where I'm going to be holding my breath on the 20th just because I know people are going to be freaking out. People are already...
I'm going to be in the middle of a business trip on the 20th, and I don't know what I'm going to do. Like, do I battle the internet or do I battle the people?
At least with the people, you're moving. Like, Apple is going to break. There's no way that it doesn't. Apple.com is going to go down. You are not going to... I mean, mark my words, on the 20th, if you go anywhere in the morning to apple.com, there's no way that store works.
It's going to be that text, and then the images are just going to be really large, and
right?
everything's going to be discombobulated.
You're gonna try and buy a phone, and there's just gonna be a pop-up that says "ha ha." I mean, it's not. I don't know. It's insane, and I almost feel like that's a feat in and of itself. If Apple can launch this phone on the 20th with no pre-orders and have nobody get threatened by a sellout, that's huge. I mean, that's one of those things where they could, in all honesty, just be like, "Hey Google," and just point. I mean, like, 'cause, I mean, they couldn't even keep the Nexus 4 in stock and let that
They
phone.
can't sell 12 Nexus 4s in 5 minutes without the store breaking.
I mean, so I'm curious about September 20th. That is going to be a very interesting day. Now,
Yeah,
I mean, outside of the launch itself, just to see if Apple can handle it.
I kind of want to ask someone that question, like, why did you do this? But I at the same time, I just want to wait and see what happens. I want it to be a surprise.
Yeah, exactly. I am excited to see how this happens. But
yeah, it's gonna be one of those deals where you wake up at 12:01 and it's like, hey, 1 to 2 weeks to get your iPhone, and then at 12:05 it's gonna be 6 to 12 months.
Yeah, exactly. And then I am scared. I'm scared to go into a store. I'm scared to see if if there's gonna be a line or anything like that. And that's the question. Like, man, they just have to have so many phones, because how many phones does AT&T get? How many phones does Verizon get? How many phones do China and Japan and Germany? Like, how did they figure that out?
China Mobile has like 756 million subscribers. You have to think at least 100 million of those people want iPhones.
Right? Or maybe they just no. I mean, yeah, it's going to be crazy. The internet's going to explode on the 20th.
Yeah.
It's all going to come crashing down because everyone wants an iPhone 5S or a 5C. and that's going to be the worst part, is that they're able to pre-order the 5C, so that's good. And I'm
that's the weirdest part. Like, why don't you just not let you pre-order them both?
Right?
Who's going to pre-order the 5C?
I'm almost sad that we have to wait so long to find out what sells better. Like, I feel like after the first month, Apple should be like, oh, this is what we're looking at now. 5C is outselling the 5S, or the 5S is outselling the 5C, because I'm super curious about that.
Well, hey, Friday is only 3 days away, so
watch Apple just go down from pre-orders for the 5C.
If Apple crashes for the 5C pre-orders, I'm gonna have to reevaluate being in this job, because I will probably have to admit that I know absolutely nothing about what people think.
That cheap on contract price is probably going to be the kicker, because I mean, subsidized pricing here in the States is still a thing. As much as T-Mobile doesn't want it to be, in Verizon and AT&T,
it's going to be for a very long time.
Yep, it's that's a thing. So, and it's not going anywhere anytime soon. All right, well, is there anything else you wanted to talk about?
I think we have covered the entire spectrum of the iPhone. Colors and specs and pre-order knowledge.
All right, so my question to you is going to be: which phone are you buying, and are you going to buy one next week?
I need to figure out some of the logistics and if I want to switch carriers again, because I have an upgrade on one and not the other. But I think that a 16 gig 5S will be in my future. Not the gold color, because I don't like it.
It's super gold, though. Like, those leaks of the gold one were like, oh, it's not bad. It's super gold. Like, that phone is gold.
I'm really upset that they got rid of the black.
Well, I mean, the black one doesn't. Oh, the slate one doesn't look bad.
Now it's like lighter. Black looked really good.
Yeah, I don't know. The other one's like space gray, space silver, space gray.
Yes, space gray. Yep.
I like how they have normal colors for the super colorful iPhone 5C.
Space gray.
Yeah, they're like, well, white, gold, and then space gray. Like, what? No. I mean, I like the space gray one. Like, it
yeah, so do I. I think the home button looks cooler on the space gray one. Looks futuristic. The little ring.
And I almost feel like you get the darker tone, but you also get on the face of the device, you get something that works better with iOS 7.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That still annoys me about the iPhone, or about iOS 7, is that no matter what background you use, I mean, not counting the iPhone 5C or whatever, but it still looks better. It still looks like it's meant for a white phone. And it's just really weird to me.
and there are some elements that you can't change.
Yeah, why don't they have themes? Why isn't there a dark theme?
I don't know. That might be going a little bit too far, because then you get people who want to customize the themes. Oh, they
No,
already
it's
do that if you jailbreak it, and then you can have those ugly icon packs.
exactly. So I mean that still exists. And I mean if you're buying Apple, then you know that they give you options, but it's still their options, not your options.
Yeah.
That's,
I don't know. I just miss iMessage, and that's the thing that I miss.
yeah, understandable. I miss man, keyboards on Android. Like I'm probably gonna get yelled at, but there's still no, in my opinion, there's still no keyboard that matches the iOS keyboard.
SwiftKey is pretty good, but I always feel more accurate with the iPhone keyboard.
I feel more accurate in general, but plus, if there's ever a point where I'm typing with one hand, the iOS keyboard is just worlds better. All right. Well, with that, I guess we'll go ahead and end our special edition of our iPhone 5C and iPhone 5S and iOS 7 and A7 and M7 and 7. We're really
Seven. Wait a second.
Right.
Are there 7 colors?
5 colors for the 5. Well, no, there's, I guess, technically 8. 5 for the 5C, right?
No, but
And
there are
then,
7 new colors. That's crazy.
okay, well, I don't know. Aren't all the iPhone 5S? Well, no, I guess the white one's still white.
Space gray
Yeah.
is new.
Yeah, new. All right.
Space gray
Yeah.
and white
So
gold.
there are 7. Okay. Well, apparently Apple is taking after Bungie, and they have a fascination with 7.
We gotta end it there.
I'm probably the only one that knows what that means. So, yeah. Okay. So, with that being said, I want to thank Andrew Gillette from Byte Now for joining me today. Thank you for joining me.
It was a good time.
It was a good time. And I'm Evan Selleck, your host for PhoneDog Live. I will be back on Friday, and I hope you join me. Thanks for joining us, and have a great rest of your week. And stay away from the internet, September 20th.
Yeah, but have fun pre-ordering your iPhone 5Cs.
Do it. All right. Bye, guys.